This is Beyond with Heather Tesch, where we examine near-death experiences and life itself, hopefully making this life a little better. Hello, everyone. My guest today is Betty Guadagno. Betty, thank you again for being here.
Thanks so much, Heather. So grateful for this.
Oh, I love having you. You shared your amazing transformation in the last episode. So for folks that are just starting in here, at some point you may want to go back and listen to that. But we've got a lot of great questions ahead, so you can stay here for now. Betty, one of the things when we were just wrapping up is you mentioned the incredible love. So describe to us what it felt like when you were in that love.
Yeah. And I hear so many spiritual experiencers say there are no words to describe it. And there kind of isn't. It just, for me, my spiritual experience felt like I woke up from a dream and I was finally home. Not home like this apartment that I'm in right now, but this deep underlying every cell of your being vibrating home, connection, love, safety, security. And that's the way that I would describe the love. It was so overwhelming. It almost made me recoil because it was so overwhelming and unconditional. But that quickly got swept away from what the experience exposed to me. But definitely the feeling of safety and security. That is two of the words that I would use to describe that unconditional love.
One of the things you talked about is something I see a lot in the comments, that people will say, there is no way I would have ever chosen this to be abused. Or they say, how can there be a God when there are kids that are being abused and all these horrific things? So can you explain a little bit about that? Because you're saying that you did choose some of these experiences.
Definitely. Yeah. The concept of pre-birth planning is one that comes up against a lot of friction because basically it gives us autonomy listen, if somebody would have told me 10 years ago that I picked my life, I would have punched them in the face. Like, no way, no how. Now, for me, I have a deep spiritual knowing in the pre-birth planning, but you can adopt it as a belief if it's something that resonates for you, because for me, it breaks me out of victim mentality. Now, in my life before my spiritual awakening, I was addicted to being a victim because I thought that it got me things. It got me pity. It got me sympathy. I could manipulate people with my sad, sad story. Today, I just, the story doesn't have any bondage over me. I can talk about my story with complete openness and almost void of emotion because I have so much acceptance around it today that it doesn't really affect me the way that it used to. I used to not even be able to talk about my parents or to mention that I had parents because I was so overwhelmed by the grief and the abandonment of the way that they died. And today I can talk about it really openly because I know that it's part of the plan. So why do bad things happen? I mean, I don't have a great answer for that. I will reference some literature that really helped me. Once I had this experience, I became insatiably hungry for knowledge. How can I find pieces of information that will confirm what happened to me and my new belief system? And so I came upon Michael Newton's Journey of Souls and Robert Schwartz's Your Soul's Plan and Robert Schwartz's Your Soul's Gift. Now, in Robert Schwartz's book, Your Soul's Gift, it goes even deeper into the levels of pre-birth planning, and it talks specifically about very traumatic experiences. So there's a chapter on why souls choose suicide, why souls choose rape, why souls choose miscarriage, why souls choose incest. Really deep, dense, dark topics. And he has this great way of, he's a regression therapist, and the research that he came up with around this and all of the mirrored experiences and the mediums that helped him channel, and Yeshua is involved in the writing of his book as well. It's just incredible. And it really gave me a lot of solace. So, today I don't know the bigger picture. So I don't have a great explanation. Like, why do children die? I can't tell you. To the human, there is no explanation. To the soul, I know that there is a much deeper meaning. And that's a soul's purpose sometimes, is to be here for a short amount of time. It could be to teach the parents about compassion and love. It could be because the parent died in a previous life, and so they were balancing out the energy so they could both experience it. In heaven, we only experience one thing, and that's unconditional love. So we come to Earth School to experience very dense experiences, because this is nothing like what home is like. So for a lot of people, we sign up for really dense experiences because we really want to experience all that we can. We're picking the highest, craziest roller coaster in the amusement park, because why am I going to spend this time at the amusement park just going on the teacups? Like, that's pretty boring. So some people do choose very contrasted lives. And yeah, I wish that there was some great, profound answer, but really it's spiritual autonomy, and really only the higher self has the answer for why things happen the way that they do.
And Betty, I'll go ahead and I'll put a link where people can find those books. I also want to commend you because I do like how you own everything about your past. You did talk about making a contract with the person that molested you as a child. And so then that brings in my mind the question of, so what about a life review? Because in a life review, when we do bad things, we feel it, we feel the pain. And yet you're saying that, we agreed in advance. So to me, can you blame somebody? I mean, it brings up so many questions.
Yeah, I think that one of the main spiritual lessons that I'm here to learn is the lesson of forgiveness. How do I forgive my higher self for writing this Spanish novella of a life? How do I forgive the people in my life that have played the villain to me? How do I forgive myself for playing the villain to other people? And, for me, having some of those spiritual metaphors for Earth as a school or Earth as a movie, it's a play, we're just playing parts with each other. Those things really help. And as far as a life review goes, I believe that we're evolving as spirits. Some spirits have come to Earth over and over and over again. Myself is included in that group of people. And it's to evolve spiritually. So we have a saying that, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. I really don't think that in our soul planning process, we take on more than we can handle. I mean, our soul is infinite. It can do anything. Now, the human personality that is playing out the storyline that the soul wrote for us, sometimes when we have that disconnect, it's not as easy. But I really do think that we can do anything. I mean, think about all the resilience that you see in the world. When you focus on things like resilience, people have overcome so much, so many obstacles, and they live to tell the tale, and they inspire others to keep going and stay motivated. So I really do think that, there is something to be said for that. And yeah, I really believe that in that process, in the life review, it's so quick. A life review is human seconds. It's nothing in eternity. It's a blip. And again, it's just about experience. In heaven, it's only unconditional love. Could you imagine how boring that is for all of eternity? Like, snooze, let me come down here and see what fire is like.
You did experience a lot of craziness. And one thing that was really interesting about your life review was that you not only experienced what you experienced, but you also experienced what your aunt had felt. And I've never heard about that before.
Yeah, I've never really shared about that aspect of my experience before. I'm just starting to come out and share about it. Number one, because I'm not sure if it's not compassionate to share about the fact that I've felt that kind of loss. I mean, I would never try to approach somebody who's lost a child and be like, oh, I know exactly what you're going through. Mm-hmm. But I did experience it. And I don't know if it was to heal ancestral things or if it kind of felt like, have you ever heard of the movie The Giver or read the book The Giver, where there's one person who's downloaded with all of the memories of everything that's ever happened on Earth? And it almost felt like that in the spiritual experience. I was experiencing everything. And there's so much pain and so much suffering. And then there's also so much love and so much compassion. And the duality that we get an opportunity to live in here on earth is just tremendous, tremendous. But as I continue to conceptualize and integrate that part of my experience, I do think that I experienced some of the things that I did to heal some of the ancestral trauma from my own direct family line.
The other thing that I found interesting, and I've heard this from other near-death experiencers and spiritually transformative experiencers, is that they wanted you to come back because they said that you're part of this transformation or ascension. I hear about that a lot, but what exactly is that about?
Yeah. So, like I shared, the download was very loud and clear that we are in the midst of the Great Awakening. And the Great Awakening is about a transformation of consciousness, a transformation of thought. So right now we're in a level of third dimensional thinking, which is an ego-centered thought system. And not all of us are there. Some of us teeter in between. Fourth dimensional thinking is awareness. And fifth dimensional thinking is service, spirit, God-centered thinking. So we're going from ego-centered thinking to God-centered thinking. And if you don't like the word God, you can insert whatever language you like there. But really about being of service to others and humanity and source. So the transformation is a transformation of thought. And so throughout the day, depending on what you're doing, you're straddling 5D. So when I'm being of service to others, I know that I'm living in the conscious awareness of the fifth dimension. I think that there's going to be a very large awakening that happens. If I was awoken, everybody's getting woken up. Okay. Because I was massively asleep. So I know that something's happening on a grand scale, not only because it was part of the download in my spiritual experience, but because this was not part of my picture. It was never going to be, but it is for something for the greater good. So I think that right now we live in a waking dream, and we're going to wake up to another layer of the dream. And that layer of the dream is going to be more God-centered. And it's going to be an opportunity for people to really step into their divinity and own their power with the law of attraction and the law of assumption, and be able to create the most optimal lifetime for themselves.
I have heard you and so many others talk about this coming up soon, that we're starting to go through this. And as you said, this is going to happen quickly. And it sounds like in the not too far future. So, I mean, are we at a tipping point, or why now?
Well, I think there's a lot of different ways to look at it. When you think about all of the unrest that's going on in the collective, these are remembrance markers. They are alarm clocks to wake you up to the true nature of reality. Now, the illusion outside of us is chaotic. It's insane. It's insane, the illusion that we live inside of. So, for me, it's really about creating my own really focusing on my own personal illusion instead of getting super carried away with the outer illusion. So the same way that when I go to sleep and I have a dream, I don't know what's going on in the whole dreamscape. I only know what's going on in my dream. I can only see my perception of the dream. I'm not concerned about what's going on in the rest of the dream world. So I also think that that's part of the transformation and what we're being called to do. What can I focus on? What's in my control? There's lots of things that are out of my control. I really can't do anything focusing on them, but I can create conscious community. I can feel connected to other people. I can be of service. I can, do things that really light me up. I can follow my passion and my purpose in life. And so I think that the transformation of consciousness and this tipping point that we're in right now, we're seeing so much unrest, and it's a birthing process. So the same way right before a baby is labored out, it's very uncomfortable. It's totally painful. It's horrendous to look at. It's terrifying. And then you have, this beautiful gift of creation at the end. And I truly believe that that's where we're at right now.
And it sounds like a beautiful place to move into. One thing I did want to mention, I told you that I wanted to cover some things that are in the comments a lot. And one of the things that I've been hearing a lot of lately is that people that have near-death experiences are being fooled, that this is actually a trick of Satan. So having had this experience, What are your thoughts on this?
Oh, I love that comment so much. For me, it's, if this is a trick, I'm down for it. Because I loved my life today. I don't live in any kind of fear. And I think that I don't want to judge the people that are saying comments like that, because they are where they are for whatever reason. And if that serves them, if they are living a purpose filled life, then more power to them. Not everybody's purpose is the same. And there is not just one belief system that's going to fit all of us. We're all going to find our own routes to truth. For me, truth is living my life led by spiritual principles. So spiritual principles are patience and honesty, open-mindedness, willingness, tolerance, authenticity, vulnerability. And so every day I make a conscious decision to live my life guided by that. And that does not seem like anything lower to me. When you look at the scale of consciousness, on the bottom of the scale of consciousness is fear, guilt, shame. And then as you start to get higher up, you come into courage, acceptance, tolerance, unconditional love, peace, unity, joy. So I am living my life. I go back and forth. I'm not saying I'm perfect or anything. I have my moments because I'm also human. But most of my life is spent in those upper vibrations. And so I think that it's a very, it's a comment that happens in lots of places. And I think that when you really start to think outside of the box, it can be really scary. And all that I can say is the people who are watching, they're watching for some reason, and they make it all the way through the video, and they might leave like what we might consider to be a nasty comment. But at the end of the day, they're still getting the information. So I truly believe that seeds are being planted. And from these spiritual experiences, we're coming into a place of unity and joy and compassion and empathy for others. And that doesn't seem like it's something bad to me.
And I think that's a really good explanation for people that are struggling with that, because I think a lot of people have that in their history, their childhood, that guilt. And expanding that a bit is hard for people. So I do think that's helpful just to hear your response to that. One of the things I heard you talk about was that you were transported to a space between life and eternity. So I can in no way visualize that. Can you explain that to us?
So for me, that space is the pre-life planning space, because that's where I spent most of my experience. So it looks almost like a workshop. Like I shared, to me, it looked a lot like a grocery store, but the whole of the experience. And when I read Michael Newton's book, Journey of Souls, they describe the same space that I was in. And it was so amazing to have that confirmation and to really feel affirmed in my experience. But it looks a lot like a workshop. Actually, they made a Disney movie a couple of years after my experience called Soul, if anybody's seen that movie. And it looks a lot like that. I really think whoever wrote that movie must have had a spiritual experience in heaven, because it looks just like that.
And you're not the first person to say that. I'll have to check it out. I haven't watched it yet.
So good.
And I think one of the things that is harder for people is they're not expecting grocery stores. They're not expecting spaceships. They're expecting you to say, I saw these amazing marble buildings and clouds and angels. And sometimes it throws people off. But I think we have to remember, if we're talking about God and what is out there, it's so beyond our comprehension that we really should be open to all kinds of things.
Yes, it's so infinite and expansive. And the language that I use might help a younger generation with stepping into their own spirituality. Like my sister, she doesn't have any like real conception around spirituality, but when I explained to her, oh, it's kind of like the Sims video game, she's like totally on board. She's like, oh my God, yeah, I probably have a sim creator and they're playing me right now the way that I play my Sims. And so I do think that my experience was brought on the way that it was for a younger generation, or, for people from my generation. I didn't really play video games growing up because they gave me a lot of anxiety, but now that I feel like I'm in one and I have the controller, because I have that conscious contact with my higher self and with source, the video game is a much more pleasant one today, now that I have a little bit of the the tools that I use in my life, like the law of attraction, to guide me along the way.
And speaking of the law of attraction, I heard you say the universe is just waiting to surprise us. What do you mean by that?
So, there's so much information. There's so many things out there. And for me, utilizing something like the law of attraction, where everything already exists in the space. And I've heard people describe it as there's music playing right now. You and I don't have a radio on, but if we were to turn the radio on and tune it to a station, we would hear music. But there is music that's out there in the ether right now. We just can't hear it because we're not tuned into it. So if I can tune myself in to the frequency to attract the things that I desire, like for instance, I was homeless. I wrote down that I wanted an apartment inside of this building that I currently live in, and it happened. I just wrote it down and it happened. And it's because I have this deep-seated faith and belief that Source wants me to live the most optimal life that I can. I grew up super impoverished. I had to break down so many limiting beliefs around money and poverty mentality, and it took a lot of healing. But once I started to do that, the universe is just dying to surprise me with stuff. And if it's waiting to surprise me, it's definitely waiting to surprise everybody. So your thoughts truly do shape your reality. My thoughts before were, I'm impoverished, I'm addicted, I have to do devious things to make money, I hate my life. And that was my reality. And today my thoughts are different after doing some deep inner healing. I love my life. I'm surrounded by spiritual community. I'm an abundant individual. I make wonderful soul connections with people. And that is my experience today, just by changing the thoughts around and doing that inner work.
And one of the things I think people do too is they'll say, okay, I'm going to think positive, and they'll, put little notes up on their mirror for them to say. But the problem is they're not thinking about that so many other times during the day when they're thinking the negative thoughts that kind of play a loop in their head.
Yeah, these are tracks. It's like a racetrack inside my mind. My mind wants to go to a negative thought all the time because that's how we're programmed. So to really start to break those patterns and reprogram yourself, again, I'll use more computer talk, but I have a virus on my computer and I need the proper malware in order to get the computer back to working order. And so I have to be vigilant. I'm vigilant with my practice. I am one of those people who have all those little things written all over their walls. I have Post-its everywhere. But it's not just that. I have to also heal those underlying wounds. I have wounds of abandonment and rejection and sexual trauma and emotional trauma. And if I don't address those things, I'm just putting a dirty Band-Aid on the wound. I'm not doing anything to actually attract a new experience into my life. I have to take care of the underlying wounds, gut them out, clean them, find the salve that will heal them. And then I can really step into my divinity and start to create my new conscious reality.
When you first had this experience, you wanted to evangelize. What message do you want to get out today?
Wow. Yeah. So that definitely transformed for me. And I don't know if there's a message, because I do think that everything's going to happen the way that it's supposed to, despite whatever I say. I love connecting with people and sharing the story, because the main message that I think is so important is that there is no such thing as condemnation. The only thing that's ever going to condemn you is yourself. That's it. And for me, that was so freeing. Now, I could have continued to live my life the way that I was. I could have continued to cause harm and be malicious and be abusive, and I still would make it back to heaven eventually. But I don't want to live my life that way today, because living my life this way feels so much better and it feels aligned. Today, I feel like I sparkle and I feel so light in myself. And before, my life was so heavy and dense with depression and anxiety and suffering and sadness and addiction. And so I could have kept living my life that way. And I know with 1,000% certainty that I would make it back to heaven. But today I choose to live righteously because it feels better. So if I had one message, it would be that there is no such thing as condemnation. And I'd also throw in, your thoughts really do shape your reality.
And so then the question becomes, there are people that have experienced a hellish experience, and there are evil entities that people talk about. So how does that play a role in all of this?
So again, I think that it does go through a lens of perception. And I think the people that do have those experiences have them to enlighten the people that will be drawn to those experiences. So, part of my experience felt like hell too in my life review because I was condemning myself. And so it felt a lot like hell. And again, your thoughts create your reality, even your after reality. So, Kathy McDaniel comes to mind. She's such a great, eloquent speaker when it comes to distressing near-death experiences. And, she says that as soon as she changed the thought, she didn't realize that she could change the thought, but she escaped hell once she changed her thought. And I think that that's such a huge message around what our thoughts are. And I think that for some people, they do have those experiences and it's for a purpose and a reason. And I don't really know. I can't see the big picture. So I don't know what it's for, but I do know that it's to affect others and to help them in some way.
And I think that's important what you said and when people talk about these, because some people, when you say there's no condemnation, they're like, well, I mean, everybody just gets all this great stuff right away. And I think that the more that I listen to these is no, you have to go through some refinement sometimes or some learning through experiences. It's not like all of a sudden you're a terrible person and then it's like, oh, life is great and no remorse.
Right. Yes, definitely. There is, you have to take accountability in some
Right.
way. But
Mm-hmm.
if you believe in the pre-birth planning process, you've already planned all of that out for yourself. So you've planned out, today I make living amends all day, every day. Today I live my life fueled by service because in active addiction and before my spiritual experience, I was a ruthless monster. There are no other words to describe me. I caused harm to every person I came in contact with. And there's nothing I can do about who I was before, but I can definitely be conscious of who I am today. And so today I make it my number one priority to be of service to other people. And that's how I make my living amends today, is that I'm a better person moving forward.
And Betty, I can't tell you how impressed I am by your transformation and just owning everything and just who you've become today. I know a lot of people are going to want to learn more. So just fill us in on things you're doing, YouTube, a book, just anything that you have that you want people to know about.
Yeah, thank you so much. So I'd love to connect with anybody who feels called to connect. I'm on all social media. My handle is Buddha Betty. It's a play on words. I have a private coaching business where I coach people through spiritual development, shadow work, uh, getting the trauma out of their life and being able to utilize the law of attraction to manifest their most optimal life. I also work for the International Association for Near-Death Studies. I host a podcast for them and I find speakers for their webinars for their online platform. I'm so grateful for that spiritual community. So, they also have sharing groups there several times a week. So if you're looking for spiritual community, if you're just interested in the subject matter of spiritual experiences, all are welcome. Please check out the resources that IANDS has. Shameless plug for IANDS. But yeah, I really do, and I'm also writing a book and I'm hoping to have it be a workbook so that people can start to transform some of the aspects of their life that they're unhappy with and really utilize some of the tools that I was able to utilize to start to heal my underlying wounds.
And what's nice is there are so many places now people can go to learn more and to find out more about these experiences. Betty, thank you so much for your wisdom. I really wish we had more time. I feel like I still could talk to you about so many things, but it really has been wonderful talking with you today and just getting a chance to meet you.
Thanks so much, Heather. Again, thank you for creating this conscious space. It's so important, and you're really doing such an amazing service for the collective. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Betty. So, what did you think? It really was interesting talking to Betty. Her near-death experience, actually spiritually transformative experience, is so unique. And I think sometimes people have a hard time with that because they think that's telling you that's what heaven's going to be like. But what we have to remember is they're just seeing a little glimpse. And what she experiences is going to be very different from what you experience, what I experience, what somebody else has experienced and shared with us. I also wanted to dig in a bit more about negative near-death experiences and people that have hellish experiences, because you do give me a lot of questions about that. Well, how can there be no condemnation when there are these other experiences? And those are great questions. And I do think that people like Betty and some of the other people I have, they're not saying there's no accountability. I just think they're saying it's maybe not as we have been taught or pictured it. But having said that, I still want to talk to more people that have had some of these more negative experiences so that we can all learn about those as well and, try to put this all together in our own heads. So thank you for being here. Thank you for staying to the end. And for those of you that did stay to the end, let me know. I really appreciate it. So just give me a comment and just say made it. And if you'd like, you can share something else, but I'll definitely be responding to you and thanking you for sticking around to the end. So take care, everybody. Great to have you here. Thanks for joining me on Beyond with Heather Tesch. Please add comments and questions you'd like future guests to answer. Also, if you liked what you heard, please hit the thumbs up button and subscribe. That'll help keep this podcast going. You can also go to Beyond with Heather Tesch to look for more episodes.